My feeling of having been slapped between the eyes with a custard pie was deepened by the spectacle of his dressing gown. He was a small man. You got the impression, seeing him, that when they were making magistrates there wasn't enough material left over when they came to him. And for some reason not easy to explain, it nearly always happens that the smaller the ex-magistrate, the louder the dressing gown. His was a bright purple number with yellow frogs, and I am not deceiving my public when I say that it smote me like a blow, rendering me speechless. Not that I'd have felt chatty even if he had been upholstered in something quiet in dark blue. I don't believe you can ever be completely at your ease in the company of someone before whom you've stood in the dock saying, "Yes, your worship," and "No, your worship," and being told by him that you're extremely lucky to get off with a fine and not 14 days without the option. This is particularly so if you have just smashed a grandfather clock whose welfare is no doubt very near his heart. At any rate, be that as it may, he was the one to open the conversation, not me. "Good God," he said, speaking with every evidence of horror. "You!" A thing I never know, and probably never will, is what to say when somebody says "you" to me. A mild, "Oh, hello," was the best I could do on this occasion, and I felt at the time it wasn't good. Better, of course, than "What ho there, Bassett," but nevertheless not good. "Might I ask what you are doing here at this hour, Mr. Wooster?" Well, I might have laughed a jolly laugh and replied, "Upsetting grandfather clocks. Keeping it light, as it were, if you know what I mean." But something told me it wouldn't go so frightfully well. I had what amounted to an inspiration. "I came down to get a book. I'd finished my Earl Stanley Gardner, and I couldn't seem to drop off to sleep, so I came to see if I couldn't pick up something from your shelves. And in the dark I bumped into the clock." "Indeed," he said, putting a wealth of sniffiness into the word. A thing about this undersized little son of a bachelor I ought to have mentioned earlier is that during his career on the bench he was one of those unpleasant, sarcastic magistrates who get themselves so disliked by the criminal classes. You know the type. Their remarks are generally printed in the evening papers with the word "laughter" after them in brackets, and they count the day lost when they don't make some unfortunate pickpocket or some wretched drunken disorderly feel like a piece of cheese. I know that on the occasion when we stood face to face in Bosher Street Police Court, he convulsed the audience with 3 solid yaks at my expense in the first 2 minutes, bathing me in confusion. "Indeed," he said, "might I inquire why you were conducting your literary researches in the dark? It would surely have been well within the scope of even your limited abilities to press a light switch." He had me there, of course. The best I could say was that I hadn't thought of it, and he sniffed a nasty sniff as much as to suggest that I was just the sort of dead-from-the-neck-up dumb brick who wouldn't have thought of it. He then turned to the subject of the clock, one which I would willingly have left unventilated. He said he had always valued it highly, it being more or less the apple of his eye. My father bought it many years ago. He took it everywhere with him. Here again I might have lightened things by asking him if his parent wouldn't have found it simpler to have worn a wristwatch, but I felt once more that he was not in the mood. My father was in the diplomatic service, and was constantly transferred from one post to another. He was never parted from the clock. It accompanied him in perfect safety from Rome to Vienna, from Vienna to Paris, from Paris to Washington, from Washington to Lisbon. One would have said it was indestructible. But it had still to pass the supreme test of encountering Mr. Wooster, and that was too much for it. It did not occur to Mr. Wooster, one cannot think of everything, that light may be obtained by pressing a light switch, so he... Here he broke off, not so much because he had finished what he had to say, as because at this point in the conversation I sprang onto the top of a large chest, which stood some 6 or 7 feet distant from the spot where we were chewing the fat. I may have touched the ground once while in transit, but not more than once, and that once not willingly. A cat on hot bricks could not have moved with greater nippiness. My motives in doing so were founded on a solid basis. Toward the later stages of his observations on the clock, I had gradually become aware of a curious sound, as if someone in the vicinity was gargling mouthwash, and looking about me I found myself gazing into the eyes of the dog Bartholomew, which were fixed on me with the sinister intentness which is characteristic of this breed of animal. Aberdeen terriers, possibly owing to their heavy eyebrows, always seem to look at you as if they were in the pulpit of the church of some particularly strict Scottish sect, and you were a parishioner of dubious reputation sitting in the front row of the stalls. Not that I noticed his eyes very much, my attention being riveted on his teeth. He had an excellent set and was baring them, and all I had ever heard of his tendency to bite first and ask questions afterwards passed through my mind in a flash. Hence the leap for life. The Woosters are courageous, but they do not take chances. Pop Bassett was plainly nonplussed, and it was only when his gaze too fell upon Bartholomew that he abandoned what must have been his original theory, that Bertram had cracked under the strain and would do well to lose no time in seeing a good mental specialist. He eyed Bartholomew coldly and addressed him as if he had been up before him in his police court. "Go away, sir! Lie down, sir! Go away!" he said, rasping, if that's the word. Well, I could have told him that you can't talk to an Aberdeen Terrier in that tone of voice, for, except perhaps for Doberman pinschers, there is no breed of dog quicker to take offense. Really, the way my niece allows this infernal animal to roam at large about the house, I suppose he was about to say, but the word remained unspoken. It was a moment for rapid action, not for speech. The gargling noise had increased in volume, and Bartholomew was flexing his muscles and getting under way. He moved, he stirred, he seemed to feel the rush of life along his keel, as the fellow said, and Pop Bassett, with a lissomness of which I would not have suspected him, took to himself the wings of the dove and floated down beside me on the chest. Whether he clipped a second or two off my time I cannot say, but I rather think he did. "This is intolerable," he said, as I moved courteously